All right, guys, welcome back to Healthy Kitty Club. Super excited today. I have Dr. Lisa Dickinson and Dr. Meghan Bennett back with me from Amber Wellness Group. And the last episode, we went over perimenopause, deep dived into all the things. This episode, we are going to backtrack a little to premenopause, which I mentioned in the last one. I didn't even know there was a difference between pre and peri. So super excited that we're going to figure out all the things. So let's just dive in. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Good.
Love the spring Portland weather.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah. I am here for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so menarche. Menarche is the first day of your period, right? Okay.
First day of ever your period.
Okay.
So when it begins at whatever age that is.
Okay. And is it the first day that you like start bleeding, or is it like, oh, the process has started? Like, is it just, okay, I started my period today and now I'm in it?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, when kids are starting, and a very normal time for starting periods in one's life is, 10-ish to 13-ish, and that's where we call it kind of the normal. That can certainly be, we see kids starting periods at 8 or 9, which seems a little early. And we also have kids starting periods, at 16, 17, 18, and that can also be, still normal, but there's some things probably that are going on there. Sometimes it's about diet, sometimes it's about nutrition and what they have, sometimes it's about lots of exercise, that their system isn't really, and if it's not any of those things, then obviously they're at a certain age, we will work that up for other issues
look for
going on. But menarche is just defined as the first day you ever get your period.
Okay. And is it true, like, because like I started at 9, and that just felt wildly early. Is it, I feel like I hear a lot about hormones in our food that affect like how early you start. Is that a thing that we should like kind of be aware of for our kids, that what's in their food and what they're taking in could be triggering things to start earlier than they need to?
Absolutely. Like, the amount of hormones, you can buy meat that is hormone-free meat.
Yeah.
And when you have animals that have been given hormones to help them grow more or to help their milk produce more.
Oh, sure.
Right? Or if they're fed food that have high pesticides in them. Pesticides are seen as xenoestrogens or other estrogens.
Okay.
Right? So chemical estrogens can be seen as actual estrogen in our body. So when we look at what we're eating, and an animal that has eaten corn or soy, which are the two most highly pesticided foods, and those are the main foods that most of our meat eats, that bioaccumulates in their system, right? And so those xenoestrogen pesticides or chemicals get stored in the fat.
Okay.
And then when we are milking those cows, or we're getting the cheese, or we're eating the meat, and those hormones or those chemicals have been bioaccumulating in there, meaning the more that cow eats, the more concentration we're concentrating that can be really hard on the system, right? And there's also genetics. So I want to, there's genetics involved too. But yes, we are seeing earlier menarche with kids because of a lot of the exposure, and people also can be concerned about, pesticides in their fruits and veggies too, and worry about that. And there's something called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. And if we eat the foods on the Clean 15, that we may worry less about on the chemicals on those or the pesticides on those, because like a citrus, we could peel off
Oh,
the
sure.
outer
Okay.
air, the outer peel, or what berries. We might want to make sure they are organic because we can't wash them as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's so many like little nooks and crannies and
yeah.
And we eat the skin.
And we eat the skin
Yeah.
of those, right? And so you can, get online and find the Clean 15 or the Dirty Dozen.
Okay.
And again, those foods too are not bioaccumulating in an animal. So even if we are eating foods that are fruits and veggies that are, that have chemicals on them, where it's less of an issue than the meat, dairy,
that's just
egg
piling
industry.
up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That was a quick detour.
Well,
That was a
but
quick
I mean,
detour.
that's-
Jump right
I
in.
just, like, I feel like it's such a thing. You know what I mean? Like, I just the more and more I have friends who have younger kids than I do. It's every time I turn around, it's like, oh, they started so early, and it's like,
It's hard. It's a hard
Yeah.
thing for them, and
I mean,
emotionally and mentally
absolutely.
to handle, right?
Yeah, I mean, 9 was wild. Like, and I was a competitive swimmer. I did synchronized swimming, and so I was just a couple weeks ago. We were talking about it. Like, I remember having to put a tampon in by myself because my mom was working at 9 because it was like I can't miss practice. Like, this is not an option, and I just feel like I look at my kids at 9, and I'm like, no, that just should not even have to be on your plate yet.
Right.
You know, and knowing that we have to go for like 5 million years with this stuff, let's not start it as early as possible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Can we have a break?
Yeah.
Can we not just jump both feet in? Okay. So normal cycles, what do those look like? Because I feel like those are hard for a lot of people to really like gauge what's normal and what's not. So, Dr. Lisa, if you wouldn't mind kind of going over what that looks like for us.
Sure, yeah. And you asked a question too earlier about menarche and if that just everything starts then. And it's always a good just kind of thing to keep in mind. The thing that's triggering a period is ovulation. Right? So if we go 14 days prior to that menarche, that's where ovulation, your first ovulation happened.
Gotcha. So that probably is technically the day, but nobody's going to know. I mean,
Exactly.
Right.
Right. So if we're going to look at a normal cycle, we'll start at day 1. Day 1 is the first day of bleeding. No matter how old you are, first day of bleeding, we'll start there. And then we'll go normal, right? And normal can vary. It can be a little longer, a little shorter. But if we look at a 28-day cycle, that's truly kind of the parameters around our normal cycle. And like I said, we can go 7 days before, 7 days after, and that's still considered normal. So day 1 to day 14 is the follicular phase of the cycle.
Okay.
Follicular follicles or developing follicles, eggs are considered the same thing, right? So our ovary has a bunch of follicles in them, and one of them is becoming the dominant follicle. And so that dominant follicle, day 14-ish, is going to get a message from the brain. The LH surge is going to go up, the luteinizing hormone is going to spike, and it's going to trigger the ovary to say, okay, we're ready to release this egg.
Okay.
Okay, so that's ovulation.
Yeah.
It happens around day 14. And then, in the first part of the cycle, we're building the lining of the uterus. So the where like our estrogen is building during that cycle, or that part of the cycle. And then ovulation happens, and then we hit the luteal phase. That luteinizing hormone, brain triggering the ovary. Now we're in the luteal phase. And the corpus luteum, so that ovary we've ovulated, and the egg is now out, and the shell around the egg is called the corpus luteum.
Okay.
Okay. Another right root. And so it becomes that corpus luteum is what makes the progesterone.
Oh.
And that makes progesterone for about 12 days. And then, and what we're doing with that progesterone is we're stabilizing the lining of the endometrium. We're stabilizing what that estrogen has built, right? And so that lining being nice and stable is really important for if there's a pregnancy, so we can have that egg embedded. That progesterone from the corpus luteum, if there was a pregnancy, would keep that lining stable until the placenta could take over and continue that progesterone rise.
Okay.
Because there's 12 days, right? So we're at day 14 ovulation, now 12 days later, that's day 26.
Oh, sure.
Right? And then that corpus luteum no longer is making progesterone, right? And then that progesterone levels drops off, and it signals it kind of that stabilization that we were making on the lining starts to destabilize.
Oh, sure.
And then so the progesterone's nice and low now 2 days after, and lo and behold, our period starts. And that's day 28.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is a normal 28-day cycle. Now, if we have not super strong eggs, we might have a shorter luteal phase because the shell may not be as strong, and that's something, as we talk a little bit further today, that may trigger earlier cycles or even heavier cycles because we weren't able to stabilize the lining as efficiently, right?
Okay.
Or if there's some things like stress. Stress might prolong that follicular phase, making the ovulation happen later. And then our luteal phase still may be, that 14 days. And so then our periods might be 35 days.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so that's kind of the nuance with that.
Yeah.
That 28 or plus or minus normal cycle.
Okay. I started tracking. You'd be very proud of me.
Oh, good job.
Okay, I'm learning. Cause none of that I ever paid attention to, and I've had 2 babies. Like it's just like, oh, it just happens. You know what I mean? But like to hear it broken down is like so wild. Yeah. That all of that just happens on its own. It just does its own thing, how it's supposed to. So crazy. Okay, so ovulation timing, that's all basically what you just went over, right? Is like how everything, the 12 days and then the 14 days. Estrogen and progesterone. So your estrogen is coming from the, oh gosh, what did you call it? The shell, right? No, that's progesterone. Yeah. Okay. What about our pituitary gland?
So our pituitary gland is kind of the master regulator. It's right, a little walnut up in our brain, and it has FSH in there, and that's triggering the ovaries to make estrogen.
Okay, what's FSH?
Follicular stimulating hormone.
Okay.
Remember that follicle?
Yep.
The follicular phase.
Totally.
So FSH, right? We're making connections.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Putting the puzzle pieces in.
Yeah, totally. So in our pituitary gland, we have FSH and LH, and these are hormones we talk about in menopause a lot because that's when those numbers go really high. It's basically feedback. We're getting feedback, and so if there's the FSH is triggering the ovary to release estrogen, then it gets feedback to here say, oh, we're good, we don't need very much. But in menopause, which we'll talk about later, just as an example, if the FSH is triggering the ovaries to release estrogen and it's not, and then it keeps saying, hey, release, and it's not, and release, and it's not, the number keep going up. We're going to keep releasing more FSH in order to try and get the the ovaries to release estrogen.
Okay.
Right. So that's more of a menopause topic, but just as an example. The other things and that we'll get into in a moment is our thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, is also in our pituitary, and so our thyroid plays a big role with our hormones and how the things that we are managing, even our cycle regulation, is very much tied to our thyroid. And then our ACTH is also there, and that's what's triggering our adrenals to make cortisol.
Okay.
And so,
what's an ACTH?
What is ACTH? That's a good question. I don't remember what all that stands for, but it's like FSH and LH.
Okay, it's
and
another
TSH.
hormone.
It's a stimulating hormone.
Okay.
And it's stimulating the adrenals to make cortisol.
Gotcha.
Right? And so our stress regulator.
Yeah.
Prolactin's up there too, and that's what we use for helping when we're breastfeeding,
Okay.
right? Oxytocin is in there, and that's also
That's like
another
happiness, right?
right. So there's a
Yeah.
there's a lot
I know some
of
things.
totally there's a lot of things happening in the pituitary gland, and so if one's off,
Yeah.
sometimes we can get crossed messages there. So anyway, just
Okay.
kind of the pituitary gland and hormones.
Is
and
running the show.
It's yeah, and as we keep talking about the different aspects of how our cycles are regular or not regular in these premenopausal years, it all
Has
it's all
factors in
connected.
there.
Yeah, it's all factors in.
Okay. So Dr. Megan, she mentioned a little bit adrenal fatigue, like chronic stress. What does that look like on our bodies, our systems, our cycles?
Yeah.
All the things.
So the adrenal glands are little glands that sit on top of our kidneys, and they're where we make cortisol. We also make DHEA, which is a precursor hormone.
Okay.
And we also make aldosterone, which regulates blood pressure. Are those the big? Is there more that I'm missing? Okay.
Well, and I mean, there are other hormones that are made in there, but like men make progesterone in their adrenals.
So when we experience stress, we will make more cortisol to, I think of it evolutionarily, like run away from danger. You're going to have this burst of cortisol to be able to get away from this stressful situation.
Right.
Our ancestors were like running from acute danger. Nowadays, we have more chronic stress that we're dealing with. So we get this kind of ongoing signal of a stress reaction happening. And that is not great, of course, for lots of reasons, because we get stuck in this chronic stress feedback loop. So we get this communication with our brain and the ACTH. The aldosterone serves a purpose to get you away from danger. It's going to like tighten your blood vessels so you can pump your blood easier and run.
Okay.
But if this is why people with a lot of stress, a lot of chronic stress, will get high blood pressure because you're always ready
thinking
to
you gotta,
run.
Yeah. Okay.
So that we can do a lot of things to try and get ourselves out of acute stress and chronic stress.
Yeah.
But that influences our sex hormones partly from making us feel hormone fluctuations more dramatically. And if we're making more cortisol, we're making more DHEA. And DHEA, our body can turn it into estrogen or it can turn it into testosterone.
Oh.
And so
Can I ask a quick question while you're on that? What triggers it to do one or the other? Like, what does that look like?
Genes.
Yeah, and I think it's probably really related to your genes, but also I think your liver detox pathways are a big part of it. So if your liver is not able to use that hormone and move it, then we're going to, we may get a stronger metabolite in one area or another area.
Gotcha.
So it may be gene related, people who have similar, maybe fibroids in the family history or PCOS in the family history or, other conditions, their cycles may convert into
just naturally go that way.
that direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
I was like,
Great question.
I'm bad at circling back. So I'm like, wait, what was that she said? Those big words? Okay, so goes one way or the other.
Yeah. So to kind of circle back to where we started talking about all this hyperestrogen.
Yeah.
If we are having all this stress going on, we are, in some people, in some scenarios, we're going to be shunting all that DHEA into making more estrogen. So that's going to throw off cycles because your estrogen is going to go higher. Okay. And other people, that DHEA is going to go into making more testosterone, and that's going to throw off cycles.
Yeah.
Because as cycling people, we generally don't want lots of testosterone because that's going to throw off ovulation and a whole other cascade of things that we'll get to. But
oh my gosh,
stress really impacts our hormones.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I don't know a single person who doesn't just like, for the most part, live majority of their lives stressing about something.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
Well, and one other thing too, to add to that, like if, our cycles, and I should have mentioned this to begin with, our cycles are really designed for one thing, and that's population. Our to create a pregnancy, right? And so if the human that's going to hold the pregnancy is under a stress state, that's not good for survival of that species, that human, right? And so by changing when ovulation happens, it changes it in order to hopefully protect the human that is going to be carrying that pregnancy or not at that time. So all the things we talk about today, if we go back to this human, having periods is the most important for species survival, right? And so it's going to all these things, all these hormone cascades, all the stimulating hormones and what they're doing and where the messages are getting crossed. It's really a perfect 28 plus or minus a few days cycle tells us that we're in a pretty homeostasis setting in our system. So we're trying to figure out, as naturopathic physicians, we're trying to figure out how to get somebody back to that place and what are the nuances that are getting in the way and what are the clues that we're getting from that. Like Dr. Meghan said, if blood pressure is high or low, we're probably going, and they have period dysregulation, we're going to probably look at what's going on with their stress.
Right. So many things that feed into just like making it a safe, happy place that works.
Yeah.
Crazy. So crazy. Thyroids. This is a big one for me because we've talked a little bit about it. I've got nodules on my thyroid and I was super happy you went in. They were like, they're pretty small, no big deal. But I did probably about 6 months ago have every symptom of Hashimoto's disease, which is, kind of plays into it or whatever. So that kind of triggered me to change my diet and my health and get things under wraps, but I never really realized how much. Again, I just kind of have been going through life like la 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 la, no big deal. And my cycles have always been crazy, so I'm super curious. Like thyroid, your cycles, how does that affect? What does that look like? Because it's a way bigger thing than I ever realized, for sure.
Yeah, so thyroid is really like our master regulator on it all, right? So if something is off with cortisol or with stress or sex hormones are off, the thyroid's going to be your protector, right? It's going to be your clue that something is off. And so TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, sends a message to the thyroid gland to release T4.
Okay.
T4 then breaks down into T3, which is our active hormone for thyroid. What things the thyroid does for us, it helps us with our skin integrity, it keeps our hair on our head, it helps with our digestion and keeping that regulated, it helps with our energy levels, our mood, our metabolism. So thyroid is like all the really nice things for life to make us happy humans, but not imperative for survival, right? So if our survival is being threatened, right? If we don't have enough food or our iron's low or, our hormones are way off.
Or autoimmune.
Or you're autoimmune, right? Then that free T3, that active one for all those nice things we just talked about, gets sent into reverse T3.
Oh.
Reverse T3 does not do any of those things, but free T3 and reverse T3 and T4 all bind together, and the numbers send a message back up to the brain saying, we've got enough, or we don't have enough, right? And so if the TSH goes up, then it's working really hard to release more out of our thyroid gland. The TSH goes down, then it says, oh, we've got enough down here. And funny enough, when we're in a stress state, it may look like our TSH is perfect. It's right in the normal range, and we like it between 1 and 2. You might have a level, I mean, the reference range is typically, depending on the lab, 0.4 to like 4.5.
Okay.
And, you know, as naturopathic physicians, we like it a little bit more tightened up. So 1 to 2 is our happy place.
Okay.
But we can have a happy TSH, and a lot of physicians will only order TSH because it should give us the information we need.
Yeah.
But we need to know what free T4 and free T3 are doing, because if we're getting a lot of reverse T3, we could have a normal TSH and we could be having all those thyroid symptoms that we just talked about, right? And so we want to make sure our numbers are lining up and we are getting what our thyroid needs. Yeah. And if our T3 is low, or free T3 is low, we might actually give somebody, you know, medication for T3. Or if it's low normal, we might just give them adrenal support or really try and regulate their hormones, because once those get regulated, then that T3 should come back to normal, and we don't want to overshoot that T3. So it's this trifecta of cortisol, adrenal, thyroid, and sex hormones. And it's the same for men and women, right? We just have a little bit more dominant hormones in one or the other places. But we have this trifecta that is really important things to consider for that. And Hashimoto's is definitely a thing that can make thyroid function way wacky, right? Because you can have swings of hyper and swings of hypo. And so sometimes when you get a lab test done, you might just hit a moment in time that everything was spot on and really good, or you might swing here or you might swing there. So you really need to like understand your symptoms, and it's your immune system attacking your thyroid, and immune surveillance is a little bit off. And what do we need to do to protect immune or improve immune surveillance is manage our stress, so that our immune system is on the front burner, not on the back burner. Right. And so, sidebar, one of the best things you can do for Hashimoto's is avoid gluten.
Oh.
That's one of the best treatments for Hashimoto's. So anyway,
that's huge.
A lot of GMOs, a lot of stuff we don't process well with gluten in this country, the way we have modified it. So.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, because it's so funny. You're always just like hitting all my little like weird issues right on the head. Like I'm just like, no offense to my doctor, because this is the first doctor I've ever had that actually listened. So I don't want to knock too bad. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's weird, because that's kind of the conversation that happened, was like, well, yes, you have, I mean, hair falling out in clumps. Like it was wild. Gained like over 40 pounds, not sleeping, super, super cold all the time. And then super, super hot, itchy, just I mean, there was like every single one of them. And then with the nodules, you know, and it was like, okay, they did the test and it was like, oh no, everything's fine. And I was like, okay, then why do I have all of these things that I've never had? Like, what's going on? And so I, changed my diet. I'm doing super, super clean shakes twice a day with like protein and chia seed and flaxseed and all the things that are definitely helping. No fast food, no, I have quite the sugar addiction, cut that out, like definitely helping all the things. But that makes so much sense that like, it swings and you might have just caught it at a time that like things are okay right now. And does thyroid issues, can those run in your family? Okay, that's what I thought. I have numerous aunts that have major thyroid issues. One just had hers removed. So yeah, it's such a huge thing that I just never thought of. And side note, how come I only really feel like I hear about thyroid issues in women and not men? Like, is that a thing? Am I just crazy and they don't talk about it? Or is it more common in women? Because
It's more common in women.
it is. Okay.
Yeah, not to say that men can't have thyroid problems, but yeah, it's more common in women. Also, it's more common to have Hashimoto's, to have an autoimmune thyroid issue, which autoimmunity in general is just more common in women.
Why is that?
Stress.
That's what I thought.
We do it all.
Yeah. And, the trifecta, right? Right. Testosterone is a really amazing superpower hormone, and they're more stable, right?
Okay.
That hormone production is more stable. Estrogen, progesterone is this throughout the month, right?
Wacky.
And then you hit perimenopause, which we talked about, an episode ago. So that
roller coaster.
that is a big deal in itself. So just the internal environment, and like Dr. Meghan was saying, stress, and all the periods and the blood loss, and low iron might be the stress the body's having that makes you run from the tiger, just because your iron is low, right? And you really can barely function. You're only doing what you can do because you don't have enough iron.
Yeah.
Right. So it seems like, it's a little bit of disparity, but men can have it if they've got low testosterone and if they're super stressed out, that, thyroid is going to regulate that as well for them.
Okay. So I know you said the thyroid protects with our cycles. What does it do? Like, does it shut it down? How does it affect that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of how that, like, the regulation happens, so it keeps it cycling normal if everything's good, or it can be a part of the change in it just to protect you.
Okay. Okay, so Dr. Meghan, let's talk pregnancy and fertility. Because I know that's a huge thing, especially I feel like it's so much more common that people are struggling with it, which it seems like there's a whole lot of factors in there. So what does that look like? How do menstruation or cycles, how does that set us up?
Yeah, I mean, like Dr. Lisa said, that's kind of the whole point of the menstrual cycles is procreation, and that's what our bodies are geared to do to survive our species. So when we're looking at fertility, we will often look at what are your cycles like, start tracking ovulation, when is that LH spike happening, and then if we're trying to get pregnant and time fertility, we have a window before that LH spike happens and a little window after. So you have this fertile period in your cycle where you can get pregnant. So then if we are trying to get pregnant, we usually try and time it around those things.
And how long is that usually? Just it's like a few days,
4 to
right?
6 days.
Okay.
So we have a bigger window before and then a smaller window after. So once that egg is released, if it's not fertilized within 24 to 36 hours, then it's not going to happen that cycle. But yeah, anyway, so fertility is really like the goal.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, there are more issues happening. I think there's multiple factors involved in that. I think some of it is people are waiting till they're older to even start trying to have babies. And that's great in a lot of ways because then we get to start careers and build up a situation that we want to bring a baby into the world.
Feel more stable, maybe there's less stress.
Ideally.
Hopefully.
But if we're not really even thinking about any of that beforehand and things are out of balance, then that can make it harder to get pregnant. We need time to get everything in alignment, right? We're seeing this whole triad, this cascade of things that have to be in alignment to make ovulation and fertility happen.
So if we're waiting till late in the game, then you still have to fix all of that and get it all in order, and then that window is just getting smaller.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we have time on our side, then there's lots we can do. As naturopaths, we like to look at the whole picture. We are going to test your hormones. We're going to look at your cycles. We're going to test ovulation. We're going to look at cortisol and your thyroid. And like Dr. Lisa was mentioning, we're going to look at iron. We're going to look at vitamin D. Like, what else is out of balance in your system that might be causing enough stress that your cycles are wacky or your ovulation isn't lining up like it should. One of the things we see sometimes is that fertile cervical mucus that we get around ovulation doesn't line up with when we actually see the spike in the LH spike.
Oh.
So sometimes we have to try to align those things because that fertile cervical mucus is what's going to draw the sperm into the egg.
Gotcha. Oh, so that helps them travel. So they're not just they're not just on their own doing all the things.
Yeah, and it also protects against, from the acid in the vagina. Like there's so many things that,
Okay. Okay.
Lines
I just
up.
want to clear that up.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, so it's not just super
Not just
sperm?
passive egg.
Yeah.
No.
No. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure that's out there. We still have lots to do with this situation. That's so funny. Okay. So those two not aligning, is that something that's common, or is that like what would cause that?
I guess I'm not sure how common it is.
Stress, man.
That's that thing that is going to protect you as the human, right?
The host.
What can it do? The host, right? The host, right? To the parasite that's about to take over your system.
We're all moms, right?
Yeah,
Totally. Oh
totally.
my gosh. I had hyperemesis, so I definitely the parasite is right. Just like, I think they're taking everything I have. I remember going to the hospital and being like, am I gonna make it? And they were like, and I'm like, what about the baby? And they're like, the baby is so healthy and so strong. And I was just like, what do you mean? Well, they're taking everything from you, but it's fine. Don't worry. I'm like, oh, that's sucking the life out of me, literally. My gosh. Anyway, sorry. Okay, so stress can make those not line up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's 3 things we can look at, and not to get too far down the fertility rabbit hole, but there's 3 things we can look at to see if when we're ovulating. So checking your cervical mucus. So it goes from watery to creamy to that like stringy egg white fertile cervical mucus.
Okay, and that's when it's like is fertile.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Egg whitey.
Yeah.
Kind of feels like an egg white,
Yeah.
or you have to wipe twice when you're going to the bathroom. You're like, oh,
Yep. Not
little jellyfish.
Yeah.
Came out of me.
Okay. Yeah.
Our body
Perfect.
temperature
Okay.
goes up about 0.5 degree after ovulation, and it kind of stays elevated after. And then in the urine, you can measure LH happening. So that's what we're doing on ovulation predictor strips.
Gotcha.
We're measuring that bump in LH hormone.
Okay. Man, that's a lot. So, okay. Because I think it's amazing that women are having babies later in life. I think that seems awesome. I was 21. And while there are bonuses to that, in that
Absolutely.
at 42, I'm like, oh, I'm almost done with y'all. I do think there's something to be said for like the stability and the like calm that could come with later in life and getting things out of the way and all that. But say for somebody who's in their 20s and has no plan to get pregnant soon, but they want to make sure that they're solid. What are the things that they should make sure that they're just doing for themselves and keeping good to go, so that later in life they may not have as many things to kind of, aside from the obvious stress, that just seems like number one. But you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, how do you make it so that, okay, if you are later in life, you may have less that you need to kind of dial in?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything feels irregular, which I think we're going to get into next, get it checked out. And I think so often we're just not educated as to what abnormal is as women. We're just like, oh, periods suck and
Yep.
your life is going to suck for a week, a month. And like,
Totally.
it just doesn't have to be true. And that actually can mean there's something out of balance.
Right.
So, you know, in your 20s, when you don't have the stress of a family, is a great time to work on regulating things and look at what's going on and why cycles might be off, why they might be painful, why, you know, whatever.
Yep.
I think that's a big piece. I think looking at nutrition, as we kind of touched on in the very beginning, right? If we're eating happy, healthy animals and eggs, then we're going to be getting all of the amino acids we need to regulate all the different systems in our body. If we have good fiber, that really helps regulate hormone levels in the body. So making sure you're getting in your fruits and veggies and seeds, and like you mentioned, your chia seeds and your flax seeds. Those are great to help regulate hormones. They have our good healthy fats in there. And making sure we have enough fat, which, you know, in the 90s, everybody was scared of fat, but we need enough body fat percentage to regulate hormones appropriately. It's the backbone of our hormones is cholesterol.
Okay.
So we need fat to have appropriate hormone levels in the body.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a big, I feel like especially the fats is a big one. Because it's just, I feel like that's always the first thing to go is like, oh, I just got to get rid of all of them. I just can't have any at all because that's.
And when we think about the brain is 80% fat, every cell in your body has a lipid layer around it, a fat layer around it. Fats are really important in your body.
Okay. And that's like we talked about before, like doing like protein powder in your drinks or whatever to like getting the good fats in your body consistently.
Coconut, avocado, cold water fish.
Cold water, that's right.
Nuts and seeds.
Okay.
What am I forgetting?
Nope, you got them all. Flax and chia, part of the nuts and seeds.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are all the
we can't forget the good
anti-inflammatory
stuff.
fats. And avoid, I mean, we can limit our saturated fats, and we definitely don't want trans fats. Like those fats are problem fats, but our ALAs, our omega-3s, our medium-chain triglycerides, and our monounsaturated are really important. Those are all the things that she just mentioned. You know?
Okay.
Getting some of those every day of each one.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many of us that are just not paying attention to those things. Because it's like, oh, on the forefront is like, oh, I got to keep my weight in check and I got to, well, and energy too, right? Like not having enough of all the things balanced. Like how can you not be stressed if you're just struggling to get through day to day? And, you know, great, your pants fit fantastically, but you're kind of worthless. You know, you feel like you can't do anything.
So I was going to just say one other thing. I think this could
do.
be a nice bridge to our next section on abnormal. One of the things in your 20s, like if you go to the doctor, because you're in your 20s and you're miserable and your periods are either painful or they're not regulated or you're not having them, your doctor might just put you on birth control pills without trying to figure out what it is that's going on. And so if, you know, birth control is important, right? So there are non-hormonal ways to do birth control. And also try and figure out what's going on, what's creating, you know, the abnormal, you know, symptoms that you're having. And so we see a lot of women who are trying to get pregnant who have been on birth. They just went off birth control and they're, you know, in their mid 30s. And we, why were you on birth control? You know, besides the obvious, or like to regulate my cycles or to do X, Y, Z. And that's going to be a little bit harder, or it's going to take more time. Doesn't mean that we can't do it. But it's just going to take a little more time to get the cycle back into a normal rhythm to then get pregnant. So timelines are important, and really, you know, I just wanted to mention that.
No, I'm glad you did, because I feel like that is it's like, oh, we'll just try, you know, and it's like, I remember they just ran through the list of them with me. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, nope, this one doesn't work. Okay, we'll try this. Okay, we'll try this. Like, without ever kind of looking at all the other things. And I can only imagine that, like, yeah, if 10, 15 years later you decide you want to have a baby, but you've been using this for all of this time, and now your body's like, wait, what do you want me to do? What? Like,
yeah, we kind of think of it like waking the ovaries back up because they've just been chilling.
Now you want me to do something? That's got to be a process for sure. And that makes so much sense. And it's...
And I think, sorry to interrupt, but I also think more and more people are doing continuous birth control too, which we can get into a big conversation about that, but that creates a lot of other problems. We're not made to have synthetic continuous hormones at a steady level all year
forever
long. Yeah.
Oh, and there. Okay.
Planting seeds.
Yeah. I mean, because it's such a thing. Because I don't know anybody who hasn't at least been on a handful of different things, because this one didn't work, or that one didn't work, or this, made me crazy, or this threw everything off way worse. Or the opposite of like, oh, I've been taking this for, as long as I could remember. I know I was kind of shocked with my daughter, how many girls in high school that their doctors that was absolutely the go-to, was like, oh no, I'm not, it has nothing to do with sexual activity. They just threw me on birth control because things were weird. And it's like, especially it feels like to be starting it that early if you're not active, and then especially if you're staying on it for till you're 35.
And you haven't even given your body time to really regulate all those feedback loops that we've been talking
to even
about.
Figure it out and get it down before you start
shutting it down.
Messing with things.
Well, and we didn't even talk about that in the beginning, is that it can take a year. Once somebody's starts their very, very, very first day to get things going. It doesn't mean that it's abnormal to not have a period. One ovary just may not be awake yet. It may not be ready. Or, so it can take some time to get
it might
regulated.
Skip one or,
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of periods, Dr. Lisa, this is a big one for me because we've talked about it before. I get really cranky. PMS.
Yes.
Let's talk about it. Yeah. Why are we PMSing? Why is it happening? Why is it so miserable? And how can we help it? You know what I mean? What can we do? Because I don't know. I just think and now knowing there's so many like things that go into PMS, and like I don't know what it's called. I know you'll educate us, but like the extreme PMS and all that. Like, yes, thank you. Yeah. Fill me in on the things.
Fill you in. Okay.
Yep.
PMS
Besides
101.
just, I'm crazy.
No, you're not crazy at all. No, you're just, you're going through a big deal time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I'm just going to throw out maybe a rhetorical question. What do you think the crux of PMS might be?
Oh, the stress.
Ding, ding, ding. Woo-hoo! Yeah. So...
I know so many things these days.
Yeah,
it's so great.
You're so smart. I mean, we're going to...
Stress is the problem for everything.
Well, yeah, and
it feels like it.
It is. It really is. And, and it's not just the stress, right? It's all these things that we've been talking about. And this is a big part of stress, but, it could be, again, anemia. It could be, not enough food. It could be, not the right kind of food. It could be over-exercising. It could be, anything.
Not enough sleep.
Exactly, not enough sleep. So, PMS is premenstrual syndrome, right? So it's the time before the period starts.
Okay.
Right? And so the hormone is happening, that is coming after ovulation, is that progesterone, right? So progesterone is the happy hormone. Okay. Mm-hmm. It helps with mood, it helps with sleep, it helps with libido, it helps with healing. Okay. If we were looking at a hormone cascade, we would see progesterone just a few breakdowns from cholesterol at the very top of that cascade.
Okay.
And it filters straight down. A few more hormones below it is our cortisol, which is our fight or flight hormone, right?
Yep.
And below cortisol is cortisone. That's our steroid for inflammation, a healing piece, right?
Yep.
And so if progesterone is getting used up from helping you run from the tiger, because this is the most important pathway, there's another pathway over here that goes into DHEA and then estrogen, or testosterones and estrogens.
Okay.
So it can also go down this, but if we're running from the tiger here, we don't have enough progesterone to stabilize and balance the estrogen.
Okay.
So DHEA is a co-worker with cortisol. DHEA is a stabilizer during chronic stress. So if our cortisol is getting taxed, progesterone's coming down here, DHEA is shooting up because our cortisol is our quick-acting hormone. It's the one that's going to get us out of harm's way, but then we need to replete, and we replete it during sleep. And if we're not sleeping, then we're not repleting it, and therefore chronic stress goes up or continues. And downstream from that DHEA, remember, is testosterone and our estrogens. So if our DHEA is going up, our estrogen and testosterone hormones are, did you get that on camera?
So great.
Our hormones
That's me.
are going up, and our happy hormone is getting all used up. Yeah. And Dr. Meghan mentioned earlier about aldosterone, and that's, if we look at cortisol, progesterone, we've got aldosterone going down this pathway. That's that blood pressure regulating, right? So again, if we're using it all up down the middle pathway with the cortisol, this blood pressure is not important if we get eaten by the tiger.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
So PMS is really about this relationship and how our hormones are being utilized. And also, so it can also be related to the amount of progesterone we're producing too. So as we get older,
so it's going to get worse.
Well, if the corpus luteum, remember that shell that our egg
that
pops
makes the
out
progesterone.
Of, that makes the progesterone.
Okay.
As we get older, the shells aren't as strong. We have less strong eggs to choose from.
Right.
Right. And, that's why it's so easy to get pregnant when you're young.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a great time to get pregnant for the body because the body's physically capable of that. Like there's many physical reasons, and some definite mental reasons that you're dealing with now as well, that you're done, right? Yep. Check. I mean, so many. But as the eggs get older, right, we make the progesterone, we don't make as much. It's a less amount. So we can do bioidentical hormones. We can support that.
Okay. And question, bioidentical hormones means it matches the hormones that are like already in our body, right? Not synthetic?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the synthetic progesterone doesn't do any of the happy, it's not the happy hormone. It doesn't help with sleep, libido, or healing. It does help stabilize the lining. Okay. So some people may use that for if they have abnormal bleeding, and we'll get into that, but there is a use for it.
Sure.
It is what's in birth control pills. But anyway, so PMS and PMDD is typically a combination of all those things that are going on. The PMDD being pretty severe PMS, and bioidentical progesterone is wonderful support for that. Also, figuring out what's going on with the adrenals, figuring out how the cortisol is, how we can support where the stress levels are,
how much sleep you're getting,
what you're eating, how much you're working out. Do we need to dial that back a little bit to support you? And going back to thyroid piece, a lot of people are overworking out because they're worried about gaining weight, and the metabolism is all tied up with stress. And so if we can take a break, still move our body, but kind of do appropriate movement to how our system is showing up right now, that's a game changing for
Yeah, better
PMS
for
and
you in the
PMDD.
long run, for sure.
Yeah. You know, and it also might be vitamin D levels. It also might be serotonin levels. It might also be our excitatory neurotransmitter levels. All those things can play a role, which Dr. Megan mentioned. The amino acid piece is super important for building our neurotransmitters, our brain chemistry, and supporting that. Anyway, so there's a lot of components with it, but cycle-wise, it really has to do with kind of this stress
that makes
piece
so much sense.
and what's happening on all different sides of the pathways.
But there are definite things that can help it, which is
for sure.
huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Megan, heavy menstrual bleeding, like what's considered heavy, what's considered normal, and what really like makes it swing one way or the other? Because I feel like that's such a huge thing. I know that's something I've struggled with. You want to talk about low iron, it's like, okay, I don't know if there's any left. But I've never even looked into, aside from like eating more iron rich foods, you know what I mean, and taking supplements, but like, yeah, what does that look like and how can we kind of regulate it?
Yeah, I think normal amount of bleeding can be a relatively bigger range of, you know, generally a lot of people kind of start a little spotty and then get a heavy day or two and then get lighter and, you know, have like 4 to 6 days of bleeding. Heavy menstrual bleeding, you know, if we want to go to the extreme end of hemorrhaging, is if you're changing a super pad or a super tampon every hour.
Okay.
Which some people
Yeah.
do that have that extreme end. If you're, you know, maybe every 2 hours, that's probably heavy, not hemorrhaging, but that's heavier than we want it to be or need it to be.
It's tiring.
It's tiring.
I like, oh.
And sometimes you're still
like
bleeding
2 to 3
through.
hours. It's like, oh, okay, here we go again. Like, that's just, and that's all I feel like since a teenager, like 14, 15 was like, okay, days of just heavy. I don't really know any different. So like to me, you know what I mean? When you say like 4 to 6 days, I'm like, that sounds like a vacation of a period. Like, oh my goodness. But knowing there's things that can be done, I'm like, oh, let's educate everyone else because it's a little late for me. So
never too late. Yeah, I mean, I think if we're getting beyond 6-7 days, that is way too long to be bleeding. I have had people come in who bleed for 10 days a month. Like, that's too much, too long. To circle back to what we can do about it or what causes it, is iron actually has a lot to do with how heavy we bleed. And this feels really backwards. And I say this every day to my patients. It doesn't seem fair, but if your iron gets low, you will actually bleed more and heavier, which does not feel like that's a wise decision for the body to have made. But it's true. So a lot of times if we can actually get your iron up high enough, that can stop some of the heaviness. But we also have to look at what's going on with the hormones and how that might be contributing. We can look at absorption. Like if you're eating all these iron-rich foods, but your iron's still in the tank and you're bleeding every month and you're bleeding for 10 days a month and you're bordering on hemorrhaging 6 of those days a month, you're just not going to get ahead with food. Or maybe you're not absorbing it well from food. Maybe you're in a stress state, so you're not making enough of your hydrochloric acid in your stomach to absorb iron. Maybe you're not absorbing B12, which we need to turn iron into our stored form of iron, ferritin. So there can be a lot of things.
Figures.
Yes, and of course stress is in there.
So stress affects how you absorb your food as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
of course.
We can have a long conversation about that, but the vagus nerve is the big nerve responsible for digestion, and it can be in sympathetic, that fight or flight, that activated stress response, or it can be in parasympathetic, which we also call rest and digest.
Sure. Okay.
So if we're eating in a calmer environment, I think we talked a little about this last time. If we're
then
calming our body down, if we're in that calm state more often, we will make our stomach acid appropriately, and that will help us absorb B12 and iron and a lot of other things. But talking mostly about iron in that scenario.
Okay. And that can run into risks of anemia, right?
Absolutely.
Big time.
Yep.
Okay.
And then hormones play a role in that too. So if we are in a higher estrogen state, that can be a reason that we're having heavier bleeding as well.
Okay.
And not to jump in ahead, but also high estrogen states can promote growths of things like polyps and fibroids and things that will lead to heavier bleeding because of that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember that DHEA estrogen piece, and then estrogen builds the lining, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And the more lining you have, the more you're going to have to bleed.
Right. The more you have to get rid of, basically, or it needs to go.
Totally.
Okay.
And the less progesterone you have, the less stabilization of that lining. So then you can bleed in chunks, as opposed to a uniform bleeding. So when you're thinking about fibroids that have, this in there, right? You've got little golf balls or grapefruits in there. Then you can't get the uniform bleeding. We get a lot more chunks off of it, and we can't get that the styptic or the stopping piece of it.
Got it. Oh, so many things. Okay. Okay. So estrogen dominance. What is that look like? Why are some people more dominant? And what can we do to help that situation? Because
because in the beginning we took that little tangent over to with the things in our environment that are increasing estrogen in our own body, the xenoestrogens or other estrogens, the chemicals, the the things on our food, the things we spray on our lawns, the things we use in our household,
right, makeup, in our everything, skincare.
Yeah. All the stuff, all those things that are, so Environmental Working Group does that Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen.
Right.
And they also have, there's also another website called Skin Deep that looks at all the different products you use on your skin, because our skin is a fantastic way of absorbing all sorts of hormones and stuff. So it is a way we use even for our bioidentical hormones to allow us to absorb. So we know our skin is permeable and it's not just ingesting.
Organ.
What?
The skin is the biggest organ.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So those are some environmental factors for estrogen dominance, and we just went over the stress factors for estrogen dominance, right? Yeah. And then we touched on a little bit ago too, just genetics. And genetics can be, how your parents gave you different genetic SNPs is what we call them, that are kind of blocks in our liver detoxification pathways. So our liver is super important in being able to convert what we are exposed to or what we are making internally or what we are ingesting. We break it down and then we turn it into smaller molecules so we can get into our phase 2, which turns it into water solubility so we can get it out of our body through our poos and our urine and in our bile. So those are kind of our mechanisms for getting things out, our hormones out that are excess. And we'll just talk about hormones at this moment. So if you've got genetic blocks in your phase 1 or phase 2 pathways, then you're not going to be as efficient at getting those hormones all the way out of your body. So then you're going to recycle them, and you can recycle them as a stronger metabolite. So we get a stronger estrogen then. And that's the source of fibroids and polyps, right? So when we, so fibroids are just a sign of estrogen dominance, and we're getting our estrogen stored in kind of a benign lesion in our uterus. And polyps are basically from thick lining, just not being able to shed it. It's like a little pedunculated blood kind of structure
Yeah.
that can make you bleed more as well. That's usually from the endometrium, or the lining of the uterus.
Okay.
Fibrocystic breast disease, people who have lots of different cysts in their breasts that are benign, also is estrogen dominant. So
would that be like being told you have lumpy boobs?
yeah, exactly.
Why did nobody ever tell me that I was estrogen dominant? Like, I'm 42. That has never been, but I'm like, you literally have just like, again, all the things. Like, I had to have a mammogram at like 33 because it was like, oh no, this is worrisome. And then come to find out, they were just like, oh, but you just have lumpy boobs. Like, oh, no big deal. Fibroids, that's just like, how is that not a conversation and what we can do to like make things better?
Yeah, time. They don't have time.
Yeah.
It's the timepiece. It really is unfortunate. It's really not doing you a service. It doesn't take that long, and all of a sudden you know a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can do something about it.
I mean, and I can own that, like, hi, we have Google. You know what I mean? But, like, I'm one who tries to avoid Googling.
Good.
Because
Thank you.
I'm like,
we appreciate you.
I'm like, what do you mean? What is all this that you're telling me? It's always the extremes. It's always the terrible. You want to talk about stress, right? Like, okay, now I just read 5 things that have me thinking I'm going to keel over and croak tomorrow. So, like, I would not like to go that way. But, like, that is just...
No.
To be a woman and have these things be so important and infect you in so many ways and it just not be a conversation at all. That is just wild.
That's why we're here.
Thank goodness.
So you asked what you can do about it, right?
Yes.
Because genetics you can't do a lot about, right? You got your genes, and your genes are your genes, but you can do things to support your liver detox pathways.
Okay.
You can get them to work more efficiently. And so depending on, what your genetic SNPs are, and, we could take a deep dive and look at that, or we can just kind of work on just healthy liver.
Just kind of assume and work
Yeah,
on
and
making things better.
There's lots of different gentle things you can do to support your liver. There's different herbs you can do. There's, liver gentle foods, eating lots of greens, reducing sugar, reducing alcohol, reducing the things that are, are going to tax your liver. And stress also is a big junker of the liver, right? It just impacts, it just makes we just want this beautiful, all these cogs to be working together, and it like puts a sledgehammer in there and makes them not move effectively. And so we really want to, do some gentle things, lots of water, sweating, castor oil packs that, we could.
I've heard about that. And castor oil packs, they're supposed to help with sleep too, right?
They're just wonderful and nourishing. They help with inflammation and pain and
Okay, so sidebar. So castor packs, what do you recommend with that? Because I keep reading different things like putting them in like on your belly button, or like what's a good way to be doing a castor oil pack?
Well, you want to cover your whole abdomen, so you
okay.
want to make sure your liver gets covered.
Got it.
And then, just like, so they'll sell like a wool flannel, or you can make a cotton flannel.
Yeah.
But they usually, with the castor oil, you'll see, like a good sized flannel with it, but you can certainly use your own.
Yeah.
And then you saturate it with like 1/8 of a cup of castor oil, and you fold it up and you lay it over your abdomen. And then I usually have people put some barrier, like a saran wrap or something like that over
to like
it.
keep it and hold it.
You don't care about.
But anytime you get oil on, cloth and you're trying to wash it out is
Good
hard.
luck.
Right. So if you have a plastic barrier, it's great. And then putting a towel or a hot water bottle over that, so the heat will drive it in. If it's sunny out and you want to sit outside with your bikini top or your sports bra and just rub it on and read a book outside, that's great too.
That's awesome.
You can also use it in the bathtub, and because it's it's thick, it's tacky. You can rub it on your abdomen or anywhere that's sore, and just soak in Epsom salts for 30 minutes. And 30 minutes is really all you need to do. And ideally, you're doing it 4 times a week for 30 minutes. If you do it more, great. But that's where we see the best benefits is the 4 times a week for 30 minutes. And a bath is a great way. I used to do it when I was playing soccer. I'd come home from a soccer game in my 40s and just be sore because you're sore. And I wouldn't be sore the next day. I'd just rub it all over my sore spots and it was great.
That's magical.
Yeah, magical.
Okay. I like it. I'm trying that. That's way easier than what I was reading for sure.
Simple.
Yeah. and sleep. I'm just like, and pain. That's amazing. Okay. So polyps, fibroids, those can all be caused from estrogen dominance. Are there any other things that kind of play into those, or is that typically what's driving that?
That's typically what's right. The genetics and the estrogen.
Got it. And lumpy boobs. Fibrocystic. Yeah. Okay. So treatments for those kinds of things. What can we do to make them better? What can we, aside from the extremes, what can we do to help when we've got growths like that are happening? Or is it just regulate your estrogen in those?
Well, and there's also, besides what we just talked about with the liver support and, reducing stress, and I mean, all the things that you can do, healthy movement, so it's not stressful movement, but healthy movement, getting in big, deep breaths every day, there are some herbs that do help reduce estrogen. Okay. So in addition to helping the liver move it out of your body, there's herbs that will help reduce estrogen. So, making sure, the first thing we would do would be test your estrogen levels, and we would test the way you detox your estrogen and where it goes and which pathways it goes into. And so that is...
How do you test for that?
A Dutch test. It's called a Dutch test, and it's a dried urine. You just pee on these papers and we send it in, and it measures your estrogen levels as well as your metabolites of estrogen. And so it helps us really kind of understand people who have polyps, fibroids, endometriosis, things that are estrogen dominant. Even my patients with cancer, breast cancer, I'll do that with to see kind of what their metabolism pathways are doing.
Got it.
So eating broccoli and cauliflower, onions and those foods the cruciferous foods are really great at helping, and the sulfur foods are really great at helping getting support.
Okay. So like if you you already have them, those kinds of things can help like break them down?
Depending on the size of them. I've had a few patients over the years actually get rid of their fibroids.
That's amazing.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's really a lot of commitment. And it can take years to do it. It's not going to be an overnight thing, right? And with polyps, sometimes the best thing you can do is have it all cleaned out and then start over. So that's not, I wouldn't shy away from that piece, doing a DNC, just getting everything cleaned out, and then we can
work on all these things that you just gave us that then would keep them from coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So that's, and fibroids are a little more challenging because we've got this mass already there where the polyp is coming from the endometrium.
Got it.
So, just trying to work on that. And the fibrocystic is really about regulating hormones. If we can regulate the hormones and support them, then it's going to, over time, get less cystic.
Okay. And endometriosis, which I feel like that's more, it feels like it's more common. I don't know if it's just that it's getting diagnosed more, that people are more aware of it, but I feel like every time I turn around, I talk to somebody who's like struggling with it. That would be the same thing, right? Estrogen dominant, they need to work on all of these things. Is there anything else that helps with endometriosis? Because that one seems like has so many factors that are negative effects aside from the obvious, but it's like, that's such a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. And I think what we talk about, what we've been talking about is like, first, know what's normal. I have seen people who have endo and don't know it until someone tells them, hey, it's not normal that you're in severe pain and ibuprofen's not working for the first 3 days of your period, that you're calling out of work or you can't get out of bed. Like, those are signs of like severe pain. And not that saying that always equals endometriosis, but what happens in the system with endometriosis is the endometrium is the uterine lining. So we're getting lesions, endometrial lesions, implanting outside of the uterus. So that can happen on the bladder, that can happen on the bowel, that can happen on the ovaries, on the tubes.
I had no idea that it was that like encompassing.
Yeah, so then you're getting more pain and discomfort when you're cycling because you're having this endometrial tissue like cramping outside, and sometimes we will see bladder issues or rectal issues. Sometimes women will have bleeding and coming out with bowel movements if they have endometrial lesions on the colon. So it can be, there's degrees of it, but it can get pretty intense. Unfortunately, we don't always have a great way to tell if that's what's going on until we do exploratory surgery to see if that's for sure what's happening. But if we start talking to people about symptoms, I think we can clue into,
the signs are pointing.
Probably have endometriosis, and then we can work on your liver detox pathways. We can look at your hormones. We can try and help you clear that estrogen. We can do things to bring progesterone up. We can regulate your cycles. We can get you away from anemia. We can give you things that help with the pain piece so the cycles aren't so painful. But similarly to the polyps, sometimes people really do get a lot of symptom relief from having surgery and removing the endometrial lesions. What we don't want to get into is that becoming this yearly way to deal with endo.
Right, for it to just keep coming back.
Yes, because then you're going to get adhesions and scar tissue and a whole bunch of other problems. It's not great to keep having surgery for your liver and your detox pathways also. So.
Yeah, but all these things that you've given us, if we cleared it all out, start fresh, and then work on all these things that help your estrogen regulate and all that, and your liver, and then it's less, then it may not come back or not come back as severe.
Correct.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What is dysmenorrhea?
Just means painful menstruation or painful.
Okay. So what's normal pain in a cycle versus like something that would would make you think, okay, this is extreme, like could be endometriosis, could be something else?
I think if it's impacting your life or not responding to like over the counter NSAIDs like ibuprofen or Tylenol or something like that. I also think the frequency, like a lot of us will have a little bit of cramping in the very beginning of our cycle, but if you're cramping for 5-7 days, that's abnormal as well.
And we'd be looking, if that's happening, we'd be asking things like, are you having clots?
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're having clots, you're passing clots, you're probably bleeding quicker than your little os can pass the blood through. So you're developing pooling of blood up top and then creating a clot, and then you are birthing.
Yeah.
This, so if the clot's this big, you had to dilate your cervix that much in order to pass that clot out, right? And so, and some women will have clots that are this big, and I've seen pictures of clots that are this big. We remember what that felt like. Yeah. And so, so cramping.
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In like, because cramping, it just seems like a normal thing, but it's like, like that is like, you're like birthing it. You have to. I never really thought about the fact that to get rid of these bigger chunks or clots, that you're fully dilated, like you're not fully, but you are dilating in order to get rid of them. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. So we can thin the blood.
Pain. Yeah.
We can, there's things you can use to thin the blood that are natural. We can, try and slow the bleeding down. Think about progesterone. Think about the, how the stabilization is, if it's, coming off in clumps or whatnot. Right.
Okay.
So those are some ideas there around, just kind of some add-ons to the painful periods. Yeah.
Okay. So just a few days, you should just be able to take ibuprofen or
cramp
over
bark.
the counter.
Yeah.
A what?
Cramp bark, which is an herb that you wouldn't even have to use NSAIDs
Cramp
for.
bark? Is that what it's called? Like we go to the store, we ask for cramp bark? What? Why have I never heard of that?
Well,
Is it like a pill, like a
you can get it as a
vitamin
tincture
or
or
a tincture?
as a
Okay.
capsule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. good stuff.
Okay.
It's great.
Okay.
Also great for after pains, after you have babies and your uterus is shrinking back down.
See, you guys are like magical little fairies. I'm serious. There's so many
magical
things.
Dr.
I'm
Fairies.
just like, yeah, it's so great. It's like cramp bark. It's just like, what? I've never heard of that. And I feel like I've been taking bottles of how much more ibuprofen can I get? That's wild. Okay, good to know. Cramp bark. So we've talked before about like supplements and how sometimes it's like there's like a teeny tiny bit in it and the rest of it is just kind of junk. Are there certain things like that we should look for, like a certain type of cramp bark? Is there a certain, like, what's a better way to take it? Tincture? And you're going to absorb more and get more?
Yeah, because you'll get some sublingual absorption.
Okay.
And then, for us, we're always going to be recommending like the best quality brands. So there's certain brands that are only available for doctors to get.
For the
there's
fairies.
certain ones that we dispense like in clinic.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, PCOS, Dr. Lisa. Let's talk about that. What does that look like? What is it, for one? Because I feel like I don't really understand it. Like I feel like I should.
Yeah, polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Yeah.
Is what it's called. And polycysts, cysts, eggs, follicles, all synonymous.
Okay.
So a polycystic ovary is about a bunch of follicles or bunch of eggs that did not ovulate. So there's a reason why we're not ovulating.
Yeah.
So we got to figure that out.
Yeah.
We can talk about that in a second. But on imaging, if somebody got an ultrasound, and many, not everybody, who have polycystic ovarian syndrome will look like there's a string of pearls in their ovaries. So it's all basically the eggs that have not ovulated that are hanging out there. So again, not everybody we see that on, but a lot of people will see that. It's kind of a diagnostic factor. PCOS will have other symptoms or features. One tends to be elevated testosterone, and that is, we'll see things about like more hair growth, where on women where they don't necessarily want it. It could be around the nipples, it could be on the navel, but that's hirsutism, and so that's a piece of PCOS. Oftentimes, women will have more acne. And acne is like the deep cystic acne, more testosterone driven acne. So those are some of the features. And then just irregular periods. Sometimes they won't have periods at all, or sometimes they might have 45-day periods. Sometimes they'll have 60-day periods, where they have that length of time in between day one and the next day one. Sure. If they're not ovulating, they're building their lining.
Yeah.
But if they don't get any ovulation, they're not getting that feedback to have that progesterone to drop off to signal the period to start. They may have a period, but that period may be longer, and it might just be because the endometrium's older and it starts to slough, right? And then it can slough irregularly. It can slough like this part and this part and this part because it never had that progesterone to stabilize it.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So other features people with PCOS tend to have is insulin resistance.
Okay.
So a blood sugar dysregulation. And so oftentimes we can treat it with blood sugar or insulin sensitizing herbs or medications.
Okay.
And then that can really support people in getting them ovulating again. Sometimes people will get PCOS-like symptoms when they overexercise and they put their system into a little bit more of a depleted state, and then their period just won't start, and then they kind of get this feedback.
Oh,
So
geez. Okay.
people who are athletes and really strong athletes, they already might have a little bit more testosterone, genetically in their system, because that definitely helps our muscles and allows us to be stronger and stuff like that. So not necessarily that would make them have PCOS, but if they had a tendency towards a little bit more testosterone and they were over exercising for their system to be able to have regular periods, that may also be a piece of it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. So that feels like.
And then we could get into like adrenal PCOS with the DHEA.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. The adrenal, like the DHEA feeding into testosterone piece.
Okay.
Remember that cortisol?
Then that's going up.
Progesterone going down here to cortisol, DHEA, chronic stress. We don't have as much progesterone, and then
your testosterone
goes
going
up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And then also people can have subclinical PCOS as well, where it's just a little bit PCOS, but we see that a lot in fertility, where somebody just can't get pregnant. And then they actually might have fairly regular cycles and they might be ovulating, but they might have a little bit more of that DHEA drive from that stress. And I think that is a lot about the subclinical. And we get that figured out, then pregnancy happens. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Megan, let's talk about amenorrhea. Did I say that right?
You did. Nailed it.
And what that looks like. What is it?
Yep. So amenorrhea just means without menses, so not bleeding.
Okay.
And that we can get technical into primary or secondary. So primary is someone who never started their cycles, and that's a little
is that a very
different conversation.
Is that super uncommon, or is that more common than we think or know?
I am not sure how common. I don't think it's super common.
Okay.
Secondary amenorrhea is pretty common.
Okay.
So as Dr. Lisa was just touching on, we see this sometimes in like student athletes who are over exercising and they stop cycling.
Yeah.
I think the stress is a piece of that. I think the body fat percentage can be a piece of that as well.
Makes
and
sense.
They'll get their body fat percentage so low that they don't have that fat to cycle, and their body doesn't think it would be healthy for them to get pregnant. So to circle it back to that part of the conversation, it's this protective kind of situation.
Yeah, it's like, no, this is not the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So that secondary just means at some point you had normal cycles and then you stopped. We also sometimes see that in head injuries. If you've had a fall or something where you've bonked your head and maybe damaged that pineal gland, right, where we do all that like signaling hormones. If we kind of throw off that signaling pathway, then we can see secondary amenorrhea from that.
Oh, wow.
We're kind of postpartum in an amenorrhea state until hormones get back on track.
Sure.
Am I missing? Those are the big ones I think about.
Okay.
So just looking at those pieces, like, is there an underlying reason that your cycles have stopped?
Yeah.
Which there usually is, like
Sure.
a head injury or PCOS or over exercising or low body fat. We do see this more often in people with disordered eating as well.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting in enough and they're in this very stressful state where their body just shuts it down.
Sure.
So those are kind of the things that we think about. There's a step in between that we call oligomenorrhea, where people will start getting irregular cycling, where it means we're not we're having lighter cycles or less often.
Okay.
And that can sometimes be PCOS, that your ovulation and your hormones aren't signaling as clearly as we want them to, so you're just not getting a regular monthly cycle like you should.
I have never in my life heard about head injuries causing things to just like shut down like that. But I mean, it makes sense. And I've never really thought of it that way, as like, you know, the reason that we have a period is to eventually have a baby. And if your body doesn't feel like that this is the time, you know, that this home is as good as it should be, that all these things are gonna differ, you know?
Yep.
So with knowing that like periods can slow down, or they're not as often, or they may just stop altogether, what about, I know we've talked before about like one ovary kicking an egg out, and then maybe this next month this one doesn't. Are there things like ovarian failures? Like, can they just stop working altogether? What does that look like? Dr. Lisa.
Oh, Dr. Lisa, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry,
that was my fault.
Dr. Megan.
That was my fault. I'm just looking at both of you like,
That's okay. No worries.
you fairies know everything, so.
Right. So yes, premature ovarian failure is a real thing, and that's when people have periods and all of a sudden they stop, you know, and they stop before the age of 40. And so, I mean, early 40s is still a little bit early for wanting to go through, or the body going through menopause, because
just naturally on its own, right? Okay.
But it can be within the normal range. But anything before 40 is considered premature ovarian failure. And we want to do some work around that because we really need to protect the bones, right? And the bones are really, really need estrogen in order to stay strong.
Okay.
So there are things we can do outside of estrogen with that, but we would probably put somebody on bioidentical replacement therapy with hormones so that they could get the benefits.
Yeah, keep things rolling like they need to. And is there anything specific that we can test for and know that like we can change these things, or is it just you just kind of
Well, we can certainly test hormones, and we can, we'll do FSH and LH. We mentioned that at the beginning, where we'll see, okay, if those FSH and LH numbers are rising and we're not getting feedback from the ovaries for those specific hormones, then we're like, that's pretty slam dunk that that's what's happening right now. And then, we would really, we would test, get a baseline of the sex hormones, and then we would do some replacement of those for someone. We would also test their adrenals and see, because likely, there could definitely be a genetic predisposition to earlier menopause.
Okay.
And then somebody having premature ovarian failure, maybe there might have been a big stressor that came in to really kind of trigger that.
Yeah.
Or a head injury, like Dr. Megan was just talking about, and then and I've seen this even in people who are menopausal, who have been pretty stressed out during the perimenopausal years, and then we start working on their adrenals, and then their ovary wakes up. And so you might give one more ovulation or two more, but it's not unheard of that somebody who is in premature ovarian failure may get some of their periods back once their adrenals get back online.
Figures. So to get the stress under control Okay. So, that was a lot to cover, ladies. So basically, roundabout, we need to work on nutrition. We need to work on our stress. We need to get enough sleep, our adrenals, keep the hormones balanced. From just the jump, really, because it feels like all of those things can eventually feed into all of these issues that are affecting so many of us.
Right. And then those genetic detox pathways, right? So we've got our genetics, and then we got our detox pathways. So we've got to make sure we're eating healthy foods, and we're eating in a healthy environment, and then we're helping our liver detox pathways move as much as
we're absorbing, so we need to be eating in a low stress time period. Okay. Is there anything else you feel like you want to leave us with as far as like premenopause, premenopause, what that looks like. Is there anything that we missed? Anything we should make sure, number one, to focus on?
I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, and these
love it.
premenopausal years should be our joy. They should be our time of vitality.
Totally.
I mean, perimenopause is a little, tenuous. And then we get to go to postmenopause where we just can ride the wave, which is really great. But, we should have a lot of vitality. So if you're not feeling vital, if you're not feeling, balanced, if you're feeling unwell, if you feel like your periods are off in any way, and Dr. Meghan mentioned that before, it's like, get some support on that. You don't have to just suffer through it, right? There's so many things we can do beyond a birth control pill, and birth control pill may be the most important thing for you in your time and place, and that's okay too.
Sure.
And if that's what's masking what is going on for you and you want to get underneath it and you want to figure out what's going on for you, find a naturopathic physician and we'll help you out.
Yeah. I love it. Because you're absolutely right. I feel like we as women, we just are so conditioned to be miserable and deal with it. It's just like, oh, like you said, periods are not fun. They're not supposed to be great. But yeah, if you're not just like going through your day to day feeling okay and balanced, there are things to look at. Yeah. And there are things that can be done long before there are these huge red flag issues. Yeah.
And then there's awesome people like you who are just bringing more awareness to all of this. I mean, that's half of it, right? Like our mothers didn't have these conversations.
No. And that's what's that's what's huge to me is like my mom didn't know, and I realized that those conversations didn't happen. And so I have no idea what to be talking to mine about. So thank you for being here, you little magical fairies, and giving us all this information and knowledge, because knowing that there are things that can be done. And like I said, look, I'm going to cry. Being 42 and literally spending so much time being in pain and just miserable, to know that there are people who are here to help us and give us so many more options than what is just given at face value is amazing. So I'm really grateful for you two. And come back and hang out with us again soon. We're going to go over menopause where we can just coast without all of the chaos. So thank you again, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.